This project looks at one video lecture that I have placed on YouTube back in May of 2013. By way of background, the video lecture is on the Lewis model due to Arthur Lewis, and this is how the lecture begins. I'm going to move along to show you a few more screenshots from the video lecture. So I have a marginal product curve and an average product curve and the labor analysis. Here I'm trying to show the wage bill, the wage rate when we are paying everyone the same wage, and we're using the average product curve or the average productivity as the determinant of wage. We're sharing the output amongst all of the workers. About 5 minutes into the lecture, I present a problem to be solved, production functions, and I ask the question, can we determine the GDP if we are allocating 20 workers, 16 to agriculture and 4 to manufacturing? And then the second part of the question, I ask, if the workers want to maximize the country's GDP, how would we change the allocation of the workers? We show the allocation of workers between two sectors, and we have the average product of labor as the wage determining mechanism in agriculture and the marginal product of labor in the manufacturing sector as the wage determining mechanism. That allocation of labor will not maximize the country's output, but rather moving the allocation point to the left so that we're using the marginal product of labor in both sectors to allocate or distribute the workers, that would maximize the overall GDP in the economy. So that's an idea of what the lecture entails, and the project is to investigate the data that YouTube makes available to content owners to see if there are patterns that are interesting. What we observe is 6 distinct peaks over 3 traditional semester periods within the North American system. Here is what we observe. There are 2 peaks in what I would call the fall of 2013, 2 peaks in the spring or winter-spring semester, and then we have 2 peaks again in the fall of 2014. That in and of itself appears to be an interesting outcome, and if the class were only being taught at my school and it was taught every semester, it's offered once every 2 years, but if it were taught every semester, one would get a sense that there is a midterm peak and a final exam peak in each of these 3 semesters. Of course, one can see that the peaks are rising, so to speak, so there's an upward trend suggesting, if it were indeed, again, my class every semester, higher enrollments over the 3 semesters. However, most of the data come from outside the U.S., and in the U.S., most of the data come from outside of the state of Michigan. It is clear that these are not my students. Again, the class is offered once every 2 years at my school, so something else is going on. Because I wanted to focus on 3 regions, I broke the data out and I got a chart for North America, which is US, Canada. The blue chart is Europe, the red one is North America, and the purple is Asia. Asia was 1/5 of the data, US and Canada together were 1/3 of the data, and Europe was 27% of the data. One would conclude that Asia tracks the US. It certainly looks as though there's something going on in Europe that is not easily explained. Let me just jump ahead to a table. We've sort of determined that most of the data comprise 3 regions, North America, Europe, and Asia. So those 3 regions comprise 81% of the data, and that's where we're going to focus this analysis. Because the data for Europe showed a peak around May, June, I looked to see when the academic year ended at major British universities, and these data are for 2015, but it doesn't matter. So we see that the academic year in many British universities, certainly these top schools, ends in June or July in the case of LSE. So it is possible that that peak we saw for Europe related to or correlated to the fact that there was the end of the year exams, and many years ago in the British system you took one exam at the end of the year, and that exam constituted the bulk of your assessment grade. Unlike in North America and the United States, certainly the Midwestern school where I teach, the final exam is less than 40% of the student's grade, and as a consequence, generally 35%. As a consequence, the peak that we saw for Europe would not generally occur in the North American system, partly because final exams often might only cover the material subsequent to a midterm exam, so that material is not tested twice generally if there's no comprehensive final exam. So the pattern that we saw for North America, a higher peak for the midterm than for the final, could relate to the fact that at some institutions the chapter we are covering is chapter 3 in the textbook, and chapter 3's material would generally not show up explicitly on the final exam. We've already alluded to the fact that the bulk of the observations are from 3 regions, and actually we see here that 52% of the data are from 3 countries: US, UK, and India. Because the population sizes of these countries, the 119 countries, vary so dramatically, I did an adjustment where I gave every country the US population and said how many views then would that translate to. So I adjusted the number of views the country actually had to the US population, and the 77 views in Barbados would have been a US population equivalent of 81,000 views. Clearly that is anomalous, given that the US had just 1,000 views, a line 10, 1,061. But even if we were to take that out, we see 2 other Caribbean countries with 15,000 views and 7,000 views in that population adjusted count. The conclusion would be that the bulk of the viewing would have been from the Caribbean if we could make that adjustment. The UK and Canada as well, we see the population adjusted count would have been 3,000. So within the British Commonwealth, we see that Sir Arthur Lewis's work is more acknowledged and more frequently viewed in terms of this particular video lecture. I also focus on the countries with the lowest frequency of views, and I chose countries with populations greater than 15 million just to rule out a lot of the countries that are in the database. I thought I would focus on the larger population countries, and I did the same adjustment where I adjusted their number of views as if the countries have the US population. China, with a population 4 times as large as the US, and 1 view would become no views, 1/4 of a view, if we made that adjustment. Because YouTube is banned in China, it is surprising that anyone got to view it in China, and somebody obviously jumped the Great Firewall in order to see this video lecture in China. The next 3 countries, Pakistan, Iraq, and Indonesia, are Muslim countries. English is not heavily spoken, I think, and as a consequence, it's not surprising that these countries have a small number of views. The takeaway from this table is that 37% of the world's population here in these 20 countries accounted for 3% of the views. Because of the data that are available, I decided to look to see which days of the week are most popular and which days of the week are least popular for the video. Here's what that plot looks like. I have 2 weeks of data. The first week repeats itself, obviously, but we can see that Wednesday is the most popular day, 10 views per day, and Saturday is the least popular day, 6 views per day. And the pattern looks like a normal cycle here. Going back to the 28-day moving totals, the charts for the 3 regions, Europe, North America, and Asia. Here's what they look like. And I decided that I wanted to do some statistical analysis to see if I can tease out the correlations between the patterns in various countries. The question then would be, what would drive the similar patterns. And because Europe has this dissimilar pattern with this one big peak in the May-June period, we want to see if we can explain that as well. So I decided I would do some correlations, and instead of just using correlation coefficients, I decided to use regression analysis. The R-squared would then give the sense of the correlation coefficient. It's important to mention that the analysis is views in Asia as a function of, in this first equation, views in North America. The t-value of 12.9 tells us that the 0.21 is a robust estimate, and we're interpreting that to say for every 5 views in North America, there's 1 view in Asia. In the second equation, I decided to investigate what looks like a trending upward by semester, and Asia is our dependent variable, and it looks as though there's an upward trend in the views in Asia. That would make sense. By the way, the data periods start at September 1st, so I took that first summer out of the analysis. Equation 3 combines 2 right-hand side variables and regresses views in Asia against views in North America and the trend. Surprisingly, both of the original estimates of the coefficients remain virtually exactly the same. The R-squared is 0.59, and the F statistic and the t-values tell us that we have a robust estimate here. Equation 4, I decided to regress views in Asia against views in North America and Europe, and Europe appears statistically unimportant in the presence of North America. And then in equation 5, I added the trend variable back in, and controlling for that upward trend and the peaking and troughing together between North America and Asia. It seems as though there's a counter-cyclical viewing between Asia and Europe, all else remaining equal. That's hard to explain, and the coefficient is sufficiently small that we will not place too much stock on that right now, but it's interesting. Finally, equation 6 correlates views in Europe with views in North America, and we see a coefficient of 0.1, which says that for every 10 views in North America, there's 1 view in Europe. Clearly, because Europe has more views, you would expect a stronger correlation, but we're saying that we don't have a strong correlation here, and the R-squared is 1%. So we're explaining 1% of the variability in the series by this specification. So one would conclude there's no real relationship between North America and Europe. When you drill down on the YouTube data, you can get down to the search term that the individual typed in, and you can see what countries were most prevalent for those search terms. Table 7 shows the top 5 countries, and first, the top 12 terms are Lewis model of economic development, Lewis two-sector model. And for Lewis model, the top country was Trinidad and Tobago, then Lebanon, Hungary, Serbia, and Korea. Let's go to the bottom of the table. Search term number 12, Lewis growth model. You'll notice that that was more prevalent in UK and the US, and India and Canada. So it seems as though individuals in industrialized countries would use a more sophisticated search term than individuals in developing countries. If I can look at search term number 1 and search term number 12, I've highlighted where the US, the UK, and India occur within the top 5 countries by percentage viewed. So we're asking how much of the video was viewed in this search and in this particular country. And I guess the numbers for row 12 would be that the percentage of the video viewed when the search term was Lewis growth model was highest in the US and UK. And the second half of my table, the last 6 search terms, show a greater frequency where the US and the UK appeared within the top 5. The most interesting thing in this table, though, is the fact that the Lewis growth model as a search term was more likely to be used in industrialized countries. And then the last column, percentage of video viewed, shows that that search term had a greater engagement level. So individuals who typed Lewis growth model were more likely to watch more of the video, and individuals who typed Lewis model were less likely to stay engaged with the video. Of the top 12 search terms, the individuals who typed Lewis model were more likely to veer away from the video earlier. And that makes sense, given that Lewis model refers to more than just the Arthur Lewis model of economic development. So if you type that and you got the wrong video or the wrong page, you would say, never mind. So that would explain why we see that pattern. Number 6, we have the search term Sir Arthur Lewis, and individuals typing the phrase Sir Arthur Lewis would probably be looking for biographical information rather than a quantitative analysis of a model that may or may not be easily interpreted as Lewis's model. So again, we see that individuals who type Sir Arthur Lewis were the most likely to abandon the video. Amongst these 12 searches, it ranks number 12 for the percentage of the video that was viewed. The search term that was the second most popular also resulted in the second most engagement. That's interesting too. Individuals who typed Lewis model of economic development knew what they were searching for, and they stayed engaged with the video. So that would be my choice for a title if I were to change the title of the video. Lewis model of economic development, because that's a term that shows up frequently in the searches, and it's also one that's more likely to get people who view it engaged. I know I'm hitting a target audience. I'm hitting my desired target audience. If I want people to be viewing the video and to staying with the video, Lewis growth model would be, according to the data, the best option. But I want to talk about the allocation problems more so than the growth dimension. Fixing the misallocation between the two sectors is more of my focus. I say that individuals who typed in longer search terms were probably more intentional, and they were being more thoughtful about how to find exactly what they were looking for. So you work at putting more words in there to narrow down the search, and because you put in the effort up front to include extra words or keywords into your title, you're more likely to stay engaged because you're thinking, okay, I'm finding exactly what I'm looking for. I'm not randomly going from page to page hoping to find something. I've put a fine point, as fine a point as I can on my search. And therefore, I believe in the outcomes that I'm going to get here. And when the video shows up, you stay engaged longer. It doesn't mean that you stay a lot longer, but you do stay a little more engaged because you were more intentional about your search, more thoughtful about the terms you were going to use. At the beginning of 2015, I typed into Google Lewis model development and YouTube, and here is what showed up. I got 3 videos. Mine is the first one, the Lewis model, due to Nobel Prize winning West Indian economist. It was a long title, and I'd thrown in the words Nobel Prize winning and West Indian in hopes that that would add a lot of value to the search. It turns out that those words were not showing up in the top searches. I'm sure they showed up somewhere, but not among the top 12 searches. However, back to the idea that there are 3 videos out there that came up under this search. One by Camilla Chada, and then a shorter one which appears as though it would be an autobiographical video lecture on Arthur Lewis. I do want to point out that my video appeared twice, and the second time it was co-opted by another group. They downloaded it and re-uploaded it, and you can see the quality degeneration in the process. And they uploaded it to their page, and that group was called United PAC St. Lucia, a political action committee in St. Lucia where Arthur Lewis is from. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and I'm flattered that someone would reproduce my content as theirs. I have no desire to have YouTube take it down, because I can also do some interesting analysis based on that. So here's the interesting analysis that I did. I looked at the 4 videos by the date they were uploaded. YouTube does tell you when they were uploaded. And it looks as though the first video uploaded on May 15th, 2013, the one that is the focus of this analysis, has the most views to date, well, of the date when this analysis was first done. It is now at 4,475 or something like that. It would be possible to do one more bit of analysis where I standardize for the number of days. So I readjusted the number of views of my video based on the second copy of my video being re-uploaded. And over the same period when they both were on the internet, my video lecture got over 3,000 views, and that works out at about 8.85 views per day. And the second one got less than 1 view per day. I was attempting to show the countries where the video has been viewed, alphabetically arranged. The last thing I did was an interesting experiment. I was not sure that order of search terms mattered, so I typed in the phrase Lewis Model of Economic Development, and then I took the same words and wrote them backwards. And 7 out of the 9 web pages that showed up under the first search showed up under the second search. I will conclude then that order does matter. My video did not show up when I typed the terms in reverse order. And Lewis Growth Model, Critical Analysis, that did not show up either. This is an interesting analysis which I'm not sure is necessary, but I typed in the word Lewis Model of Economic Development, which would be my preferred title going forward, and I noted the web pages that showed up on page 1 of that Google search. There was one that was not related to anything, so I pulled that out. There were 10 per page. So I looked at the 9 that appeared, and I then typed in different search terms to see which of these 9 websites would appear and in what order they would appear. So we got a sense that the words Lewis Growth Model was more likely to bring up the same websites as Lewis Model of Economic Development. These are 2 good titles, I think. And number 9 is my video lecture. You'll see where that is jumping around the table. In the Lewis Growth Model findings, search findings, we have my video coming in at number 5, whereas it came in at number 9 when I typed Lewis Model of Economic Development. I copied and pasted the search terms results, and here's the order of the pages that came up. You'll notice the Wikipedia entry. I was mentioning earlier that Lewis model doesn't always bring the Lewis economic model, and here we see evidence that it brings up Richard Lewis Communications and the Lewis model of culture. And then number 6, the Lewis culture model shows. So Lewis model is not a refined enough search. Earlier I had said that individuals who typed Lewis growth model were more likely to be engaged with the videos. They stayed with it a little longer. What I had not thought through was the fact that maybe the same individuals first typed Lewis model and saw that some of the content that showed up was not going to get them where they wanted to, and then they retyped, they added the word growth. Lewis model growth. So I can understand how that would happen. And obviously, I would then say that individuals who kept going page after page until they found my video eventually were working harder by going from page to page. They were spending longer looking at many things that were probably not relevant. Whereas individuals who saw that this was not the best search, Lewis model, went back and refined their search and then allocated their time towards watching the content. So imagine 2 individuals allocating the same amount of time for searching and watching content. If you spend more time searching, then there's less time for watching. And maybe that is what I'm picking up here, rather than saying they're more sophisticated because developed countries showed up in the top 5. It could be that they understand the internet a little bit better and they said, okay, my time is better spent refining my search rather than paging through many different websites hoping to find good content. As I mentioned, this would be my preferred title for the video going forward, so I'm going to go ahead and just change the name of the video to Lewis Model of Economic Development or something close thereto. The Econ Library page showed up quite frequently, as did the Wikipedia page. It's a little disappointing because the document at 8 is the classic work by Arthur Lewis. You'll notice this article said it had 9,286 citations. And here's where, in this search that I would prefer, my video showed up as number 9 on that page. Here's a page where the video lecture by Camilla Chada is showing up. And finally, here's the search phrase that was the highest level of engagement among those who watched the video. Again, I'm thinking that individuals refined their search to throw in the word growth or economic development, and that was a better investment, so they allocated more time to watching the video after they refined their searches. And again, those who did that were more likely to be in the United States, US, and Canada than those who did not do it, according to the data in the table we showed earlier. Here are some screenshots of the videos. So 1 second into the video, I took a screenshot, and this is what you see 1 second in. Here's a screenshot for Camilla's lecture. This screenshot is from the Mercator Center's 4-minute lecture about Arthur Lewis. And finally, here's a screenshot from the pirating of my video by United PAC St. Lucia. By way of summary, what have we got? We have a chart showing peaks and troughs for views in 3 regions of the world. We have what looks like a greater degree of trending and a greater degree of correlation between Asia and North America. And we have this weird spike in the European Union's data, which reflects, as I said, the academic school year. We have these statistical results, which shows interesting and robust coefficients, upward trend for Asian data, and the correlation with the North American views, and a counter-cyclical pattern of what's going on in Asia in relation to what's going on in Europe, and you control for the fact that Asia is trending and it is correlating with North America. So there we have it. Here's the lecture now. The title changed from what it was earlier, the Lewis model, to the Lewis model of economic development. Thank you for listening to me talk about this project.